Hey there, John with crowsnestcraft, and today I'm going to do something a little bit different. I'm still going to be making TTRPG terrain out of budget supplies, mostly from the dollar store, but I'm not going to be running a D&D game. I'm going to be running a game with this. This is called Shiver. This is a more horror-based TTRPG. I'll link it below if you want to check it out. You can run almost everything from a sci fi survival horror to a backwoods slasher and even some cool Victorian vampire stuff. They have a few expansions. I'm just going to be using the basic one. Again, I'll link it below if you want to check it out. But what I'm going to be running, I'd like to run, it's more on the backwoods slasher side of things, at least in the environment. I want to do a camping town based horror setting where it's a small camping town in the 1970s. I'm going to be turning these dollar store Christmas campers into more normal looking campers, and I would like to have them for that setting. I want there to be a campground where I can play on the innate fear of being vulnerable in a tent or camper. So I want a scene where there's going to be monsters ripping through a campground. So I'm going to be making four of these campers. So let's get started. Alright, so first off, we need to make this look a lot less like a cheap Christmas decoration and a lot more like an actual trailer. So I can't do much about the awnings, but the top snow part and the chimney I'm taking off. I'm going to flatten it out and I'm going to put something on top to make it look more like a vent. I'm going to be using this plastic sheeting. This is actually that cheap cutting board material that you can get from the dollar store. You can get packs of 2 or 3 of them for, like $1 or so. I'm going to be cutting sections of this. I'm going to be cutting square sections that will be used for the basis of the vent on the top. And I'm also going to be cutting long strips that will cover up the garland things on the sides to make it look more smooth and less Christmassy. So after I use my paper cutter to get the plastic sheeting into the right size and dimensions that I wanted, I will use one of the larger tiles to cut out the grating that I'm going to be using to make it look more like a vent, because it needs to look like air can actually get through it. What I'm going to do is put down one larger plastic sheeting, then put the grating on top of that, and then one smaller piece of the plastic sheeting on top to look like the edges is where the air is being pulled into. I'm going to be using hot glue to glue all of the little panels on. Here I'm putting the side panels on that will just be strips that are going to go over the fake garland that's on there, because again, I really don't want this to look like a Christmas decoration anymore, so I'm going to pop that on there and hope that it doesn't look too obvious that I covered it up. I figure I can probably paint it silver or chrome to make it look like it is some sort of trimming to add a little bit of style and make it look like it's from the 1960s or 70s. So now that I have everything glued on, I am going to be coating this in a black paint and Mod Podge mix. I put several coats on it just because I want it to be able to hold in the light once I turn the little light on the bottom, because it was kind of making the entire thing glow. But this will also give a consistent texture to the entire model so the paint doesn't look weird on it, and it'll smooth out all the little gaps that I have where I've glued things on. So we're about halfway done. We're at least done with the build portion of it. I've chopped it up, glued it back together, hit it with a black paint Mod Podge mix, and hit it with a primer. And of course, I hit it with the white primer for a reason, because I'm going to paint it mostly white. My idea is to do either the 3-tone look of the 1970s campers where it's white on the top and the bottom, and a random color in the middle, whether that random color be red, blue, yellow, whatever. I have four of these guys, so I'm going to do each one a different color. And then once I get the base coat and everything done, I'm going to do some aging to look like they've been well used and kept out in the wilderness. So let's get started with the paint. So, I'm sorry I lied to you a little bit. I actually primed it gray first, and then I used a white primer on top of that. This was a brush-on white primer, mostly because even after the black paint and Mod Podge and the gray primer, it was still giving me a little bit of light coming through on like the edges and stuff when I would turn the lights on and test it. So I'm adding another layer of primer, and I'm doing it white, so that way it's easier to put the more eggshelly off-white that I'm going to be putting on for the final product. And hopefully I won't have to do as many coats of the off-white since I have primed it white. Alright, so now I'm going to be hitting it with the base coat of that off-white. I'm going to be using Bone White from Vallejo. I really like this color and it covers really well. But with this large of a model and this big of a surface area to cover, you can see a lot more of the blemishes. So I try to keep the paint thin and do more coats than one thick coat. So I actually hit this more times than I'm showing you. It takes more time, but it looks so much better in the end. I'm also only hitting the areas that I want this color on because it would take too much time to just paint the entire thing this color. Alright, now I'm putting some actual color on it. I'm going to be doing the middle section of like the two-tone, and you see these campers around, so I figured I would pick some colors that I had actually seen out in the wild. Here I'm doing like, it's kind of like a mix between an olive green and like a lime green. It's kind of bright, but kind of like dulled out. I figured this was a good color that would match the time period. So now with the second camper, I'm leaning back into the time period. I feel like a lot of people, especially people that were camping, were kind of obsessed with like turquoise jewelry in the 1960s and 70s. And that color I see in a lot of places, like in furniture and in like appliances, and I've seen it on campers. So I'm doing this like bluish teal. This is also one of my favorite colors, so it did have to be on one of these. I use it a lot in my models. I don't know if you've ever noticed, but yeah, that and purple. Now going for another color that I just really like the aesthetic of, I figure I should probably do a reddish color on one of these. So I'm doing this a maroon kind of. I don't know if you call it maroon. I'm pretty bad with actually knowing the names of colors. I just know what looks good on things. So this is like a very dark red, and it might even be called like blood red or something like that. This is a scale colors paint, and it covers really well, and I really like using it. So most of these just come down to what my favorite paints to use are. Well, except for this one. This one's going to be orange, mostly just because I've seen a lot of orange campers for some reason, and one of them had to be orange, but I really don't like using orange. I never feel like I can get it to cover right and look good, but by the end result with this, it did look pretty good, I think. It covered a little bit better than I expected it to. I guess 2 white base coats really paid off in this instance. So now I'm doing the silver color over all the other areas, and if you've ever used silver paint, you know it's kind of hard to get good coverage with it. And I tried a few different ones, and I wound up just basically mixing a dark gray with a little bit of silver, and I figured I'd do highlighting afterwards. It was just so hard to get the silver to cover this big of a model that I just did gray with a little bit of a metallic mixed in, and it looked pretty good, I think. So now for the bases, I'm not really doing too much work to these. I'm going to leave the light on there. They function exactly the way that I want them to make it look like somebody's in the camper. But I'm just going to paint the like outer edges brown. That way it looks like dirt because I'm gonna put some flocking on them afterwards. So I figure if I just do brown on it to look like dirt and I put the flocking on top of it, it'll look like grass growing out of dirt, just like it should. Now, I mixed up a homemade wash. I definitely water this down a lot more because I'm going to be putting it on white, but I want these campers to look pretty filthy and I don't want to put a whole lot of work into that. So I did a watered down wash with, a little bit of paint, a little bit of black, a little bit of brown, a lot of water, and a tiny bit of dish soap to make sure that it will spread properly. And I just slapped it on there. All right, now I want a little bit more grime in the nooks and crannies. So on these like edges and spots that I think dirt or rust would accumulate, I'm using this rust effect from Vallejo, just kind of putting it on the bottom paneling and stuff to make it look a little more grimy and well used. So now I'm just painting the tires. I'm also going to be painting a little bit more of the features that I just missed along the way. I'll paint the tires black, won't do anything else to them, but I'm going to be using silver for the hubcaps, and I'm going to go around to all the other spots that I've done metal and add some highlighting here and there with that silver. So now for the fun, kind of experimental part, I'm using Mod Podge. I'm going to paint a little bit of parchment paper with the Mod Podge, then stick it on the inside of the trailer to be the windows. I don't want to be able to see through the windows, but I do want light to go through the windows. So I'm going to Mod Podge both sides of the parchment paper and let it dry and hope that it's going to be thin enough that the light will shine through. So we'll see. Now for the flocking that I talked about earlier. This is just some more gaming flocking that I have. I think I picked it up from the game store. I'm going to be using Mod Podge, which is basically just a PVA glue with a few small differences. Going to be covering the outside very, very generously with it. And I will then just put it in a bag of the flocking, shake it around, and take it out, and that's it. And voila, here they are. I think they look great. They came out pretty much the exact way I was imagining them. I really love the orange. It covered a lot better than I thought that it would, and the final piece looks great. The aqua, or whatever you would call this light bluish teal, was a little hard to get on. It didn't cover super well. I also want to say I really like the way that the light comes through the windows. I'm glad that I was able to get that parchment paper trick I did to work. I had never tried it before, but it did the job. The green I also really like. It, again, for some reason, the green and the blue had a hard time covering. They're both two different types of paint brands too, so there's no common denominator there. The maroon I really liked. This covered the easiest and had a pretty good payoff. I really like it. But as someone who frequents campgrounds and state parks throughout the summer, this was a fun little project to do, and with them all together, they all look fantastic. They all look basically the same, but a little bit different because of the colors. They're both very individual, but all look like they belong in the same lot. Hey, thanks for hanging out while I made these guys. I had a blast making them. They came out exactly the way that I wanted them to. They have that two-tone kind of 1970s style that I was going for. Using different colors to give them a little bit of a personality was pretty easy with these. I will say that the little Christmas trailers that I made these out of are in stores right now. So if you want to make your own, please do and show me what you make out of them. You can go the traditional horror vibe that I was kind of going for, where they're like camping in the woods. I'm going to be using it for the Shiver TTRPG, which if you want to check it out, the link is in my bio. You could also go for more of like a futuristic look, like a Ready Player One, like just kind of a shelter that they had available. But it has a lot of opportunity. I think it's a good size. And if you really wanted to, you can make it so you could go inside. I didn't want to do that because I wanted them to still light up, which they do straight out of the dollar store. So I wanted to keep that feature, and I didn't really see the point in making the inside of a trailer, because you know what, it's like a bed and a small table. These were more for like just kind of scatter terrain for a campsite where I can put some tents and stuff around them too. But I love the way that they came out. If you decide to make your own, show it off to me, tag me on Instagram or TikTok, and I'll check it out and I'll comment on your video if I see it. I'm kind of bad about checking my notifications. But hey, check me out on other platforms. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.